Hello and welcome to today's video where we're going to go over, I always notice that my glasses have dust on them when I look into the camera because of that light there. We're going to go over how I view the game, how I watch the game, how I think about the game of League of Legends at the pro level. And, I hope this clears some things up on, some people saying, you're this, you're that. This is how I watch it. People watch it differently. This is how I watch it and how I think about it. So, let's talk about draft real fast. So, in draft, I'm watching for a couple things here. Flex. Talk about flex. Talk about priority and counter. Okay? And this can apply to blue and red. So, talk about flex. In my opinion, flex picks are the way. I would prefer a flex pick in B1. Dependent on how strong and what is left up after ban phase, right? So when I'm watching the game, I'm thinking to myself, and watching draft, I'm thinking to myself, okay, what's the priority in ban phase? Our players, no. What are we doing? Are we banning one champ in 3 different roles? Are we indexing on certain roles? Are we purposely leaving things up in hopes that it comes to us, right? Because sometimes teams will just trade outright and say, you're going to take this, I'm going to take this, we'll handshake. When there's a handshake, I would like to think that that is viewed 50-50 by the team that picked it second, right? That they are okay and content with, we gave up that other pick, we'll get the opposite. So, in the case of blue side, if you pick a flex first and you leave and you keep your flex, and red side ends up taking what they believe to be the stronger part of the 50-50 and then whatever counter pick to your pick, but it being a flex allows you an opportunity. I think that's like thinking ahead. You want to have options throughout draft, and also if you're content with the 50-50 and view it as such, you can take the second half of that handshake matchup, whether it's in bot lane. We see many common bot duos or mid lane, Azir Corki and things of that nature. Trading is fine as long as it doesn't really affect your flex. And hell, even if you give away the flex on B2, depending on what they did with R2 or R1, maybe they tried to answer your flex already, in which case you can move it on B3. So that's how I kind of think about it. I'm like, okay, which team is being proactive in draft? Which one is saying, we're going to be kind of mysterious here and see what you show us on red side or vice versa. Also, the priority continues. How are bans going in the second phase? Are we saying, okay, this is what we're doing? We're getting rid of 2 top laners because we want to pick top lane in the last 2? Or did we just already pick top lane? They didn't offset that, and we're trying to put our player in a good position. And that's something to note when we get into the game and how I think about the game as well, and how draft and the way a team approaches draft affects how I think the game ought to go if you are maximizing what you did in draft. Counter, that goes to show that as well. Like I said, if you picked R3 top laner and blue side hasn't picked a top laner, and you ban the 2 strongest counters in bans 4 and 5, you've put yourself in a position where that top laner better get the damn job done. Otherwise, you shouldn't have put so much effort into making that top laner have a cushioned matchup. That person's supposed to be the one to do something. And then maybe R5. R5, obviously, very pivotal pick. That is the counter of counters, right? This is where we say, okay, we know what you've got on blue side. R5 is massive. Who got that pick? That is supposed to be a difference maker as well. You do not give that pick to somebody that is just kind of handshaking a matchup away, or picking something that's to be expected, in my opinion. I feel like expectations should have been in R4 because they've already prepared for it. They're expecting it. They're going to pick those champions in B4, B5 regardless, or, vice versa earlier in the draft. So, counter, I'm watching for who has counter pick. Now we get to the game and we say to ourselves, who just to you know, the overview of the game entirely before I get into it a bit more. Who has that priority and who had counter pick, right? Who did we give all that prio to? Who did we put, bubble wrap around in this game? And are we going to give them priority in the game itself? How are we attacking the game itself to further cushion and ensure that that matchup goes the way it should? Or in my personal opinion, that matchup, if you're indexing that much into a player, that player should just win that matchup. It should not be a case where that player just all of a sudden might still lose lane after you put all that effort into doing it. Otherwise, you should have put them on something that was weak side, relevant throughout the rest of the game, something scaling, and something safe. If you end up putting them on something kind of high octane or out of the box or to be a carry-oriented champion, you should expect them to win that matchup. So now when I'm watching the game, all right, we got our lanes here. All right, very poorly drawn. But the point is, when I'm watching the game, I don't really care about spacing all that much. I don't really care about crazy highlight reel plays. Because in my opinion, the game is won in laning phase. Now, if it's tied after laning phase, of course, then it gets beyond that. But if the team that is ahead at 15 minutes, see, I don't have any stats, but I'd like to think the team ahead at 15 minutes probably has a better win rate because they're not throwing games equivalent to, having a negative win rate. So, over the grand scheme of things. So, in the first 15 minutes, how is a team approaching the game? That's what I'm watching. Who is the team that is setting the tone, setting the tempo, popping the opposition in the mouth? I've used that reference before. That's what I watch. That is what I like to see. I like to see the proactive team get things done and then how the other team responds, like chess. So, I talk about Saigon Buffalo T1, MSI 2022 all the time, right? That in the bot 2v2, we had immediately Saigon Buffalo went after T1, and that set the tone for the entire game. I think T1 ends up winning that game, but it set the tone, right? And it honestly set the tone for the tournament. That's what I want to watch. I don't care how the spacing went in lane. I like a team that's aggressive. I like players that are aggressive. That's what I prefer. Now, it's kind of ironic because I gave Sup a lot of credit in terms of what I believe to be an aggressive player, his numbers before the season started. Now, people gave me a bit of crap saying, I wasn't, I don't know. I mean, I'm not the type of person to overblow a player's stat line. So the way I viewed it is this player's really aggressive. And honestly, he's a player that I probably would have enjoyed watching, but really the comment section kind of soured me on him, which is unfortunate for him. I mean, when you got fans, I guess your fans reflect on you, which isn't fair, but at the same time. So when that happens, when you have an aggressive player, that's what I like to see. Which team is being aggressive? Which player is being aggressive? Is a jungler going after someone in top lane? So if you have a situation where you did give that top laner counter pick, we know the team should, I'd like to think you already know how the game's going to go. Or the game ought to go. Now, of course, that means the opposition knows what you're doing, so you have to change things up and really think about it. But you want to get that player ahead. That player needs to get ahead. Now, personally, I think it's best if that player, that you give prio to, gets ahead themselves in the 1v1. The opposition should see that and say, okay, do we want to weak side that player over there? Or do we want to help them? Do we want to go up there? Because the assumption is that lane will be in a favorable position for the weak side team to go up there and possibly gank, right? So we see that. We see the player going top lane, or the jungler going to go top lane, support go top lane. And I'm watching for what is the opposition going to do? Have they already figured out, hey, we're watching the game, you're watching your lanes and you're playing the game and you're saying to yourself, you know, is that a gankable lane right now? How do I want to handle it if there is? And if there's proper vision, I've also watched vision a lot. Where is vision? Is the support invading the enemy jungle? Is the support going mid lane to try and get vision? Is the jungler going over here to get vision or ensuring that the objectives are being taken? I mean, are covered with vision if they want to take it or not. Like, vision is so massive. I feel like that is one of the biggest reasons why Eastern teams do better than Western teams outside of hands diff is scouting, vision control, seeing tendencies in the opposition. We see players constantly not using vision properly, and that's why they suck. It's something so small, but if you use your vision properly, your team will do better. You won't get ganked. I mean, it seems, I don't think wards should be in the inventory for very long. They should be popped out and used. If you have an extra ward, you should be using it. So, now, if this jungler goes top lane, like I said, what's red side's jungler doing? We know that this matchup is one that they may want to go after. Let's look back at the thoughts. How did that team approach this situation when they give their top laner counter pick or prio? Do they go up there or do they not? And what I'm watching for is, what is that red team doing? What's the red side jungler doing? Have they determined, hey, I'm going to invade over here? Because I know they want to go up here. Am I going to counter gank? Am I going to go up there and surprise them in a 2v2 and hope I pull it out? Personally, I think go bot lane, go mid lane, invade, offset that gold somehow, invade, get vision. And I'm also watching, now that this team has set the tone and went for a gank, are we saying, okay, well, if you gank here, they might take Rift Herald or Grubs, in which case this Drake should be red sides. And which team is stacking Drakes? Which team I'm watching? Which team has chose, I want objectives? And how quickly are they taking objectives? Like, the proactive team's usually the team that isn't scaling, right? Isn't going to scale as long. You want to get the game done. There's a game. The game's on a timer. You need to get ahead, whether that's ganking or through or objectives really quickly. Getting objectives on spawn. We're at the soul fight at 25 minutes, right? And that will decide the game pre-30. Some teams want to do that. I personally prefer games like that only because I think that means you were on a mission. You really knew how to beat the other team and you went after it instead of scaling, relying on a 5v5 at the end of the game around an objective to coin flip the game. I hate that. I think that is, of course, it's a more entertaining game to watch, but personally, I would prefer watching a game where it's clear that both teams have an idea of how they want to play the game and they're executing on it. And sometimes that idea is the same, right? Both teams want objectives. Well, then we're going to, first objective, somebody's going to get it. Now, you either have to get kills to offset that. You need to get gold plates to offset that, especially in the very early game. Or you got to go take Grubs, or vice versa, Drake for Grubs. Like, that's a constant trade we see, right? And the team that gets Drake then has to, in my opinion, get second Drake. Unless, of course, they're the scaling team, and we're watching for, are they the scaling team? In draft, we see that. Is the comp, going to be... Is the composition conducive to going for that second Drake or not? We've already stalled the game 5 minutes. The expectation is if red side scaling, blue side took Grubs. Now we have 5 more minutes where blue side really has to get the ball rolling with those Grubs. They're going to try and take second Grubs, take some turrets, get 5 or 6 void mites, whatever the hell they're called. So, like, I'm watching the game for who is actually executing on what they did in draft. Is the opposition aware of what that team wants to do? Because you should, if you've properly scouted. And are you executing on your counter? Because in the end, this game to me is a lot like this game, this classic. And I've heard it multiple times from other people, from streamers and things. This game is like chess to me, especially the early game macro. I should know what you want to do throughout this entire first 15 minutes before this is done. You should know what they want to do. You've played those champions as the opposition or as the coach. And the goal is, hey, what kind of pizzazz are we putting in here that they don't expect, because this is how the game's supposed to go. And what I'm watching for is the team that set the prio and draft, that wants to set the tempo, able to actually stay on schedule? And is the opposition capable of taking them off that schedule? And in which manner are they doing it? Are they just kind of putting up their hands saying we lost the game? We see that many times. We see that where, a team's content with giving away things for nothing. And it's like, well, the game's now 4K gold lead at 15 minutes. I'm sorry, but you're probably going to lose this game. The scaling isn't going to help you. You're going to probably lose the game. If it's 15 minutes, 2 Drakes already taken, 4K gold lead. Shoot. You've probably given up 6K worth of gold. And when you include objectives, it's just not great. We see Brian constantly wanting to scale. If you're the opposition and you know they want to do that, then you got to pick early game compositions. Why scale to 40 minutes against Bro? That's what they want you to do. That's the only way they play. Hell, you're playing to their strength. Should be playing a composition that take 25 minutes. And that's what I'm watching. Is the opposition in draft aware, hey, we're going to B1 or R1 against Bro. Something that's going to give us an early game advantage. Something that can get the ball rolling. Is it a heavy ganking jungler? Is it an early game laner? Or something that we think can carry the game in the early game or something like that. And, not pick a handshake matchup that's like, oh yeah, we'll scale to 40 minutes with you. Like, I think that, honestly, that's terrible coaching. And that's what I'm watching for too. Like, who is actually, like, you should have a scouting report on the opposition. You should know what they're going to do before they do it, relatively speaking. Now, of course, in the best teams are the unpredictable ones that constantly throw shit at the wall and see what sticks, and you can't predict what they're going to do. Hence, flex picks. Those are my favorite teams to watch. High volatility drafts, high volatility teams, utilizing numbers and stats to determine, is it worth it to go for this objective? Given our draft, this is what we should do, this is what they expect us to do, and how do we bridge that? So that's just kind of how I view the game, how I watch the game. I'm not watching the game for the crazy highlight plays, because I'm watching for which team has this team gotten ahead to the way they were supposed to in draft, based on how they drafted, and what is the opposition going to do to upset that? Because the best teams are those teams that don't have tempo, that know how to stop that team from winning this game. Those are the best ones. The ones that can come back. The ones that, because the thing is, too, you got to remember, league players, at least normal league players, not pro players, freak out when they're behind. Comebacks are not common. And I think at the pro level, the best teams know how to close out a game, and the better teams know how to stop those teams from closing out a game. So, yeah, I don't know. Just rambling about how I think about the game. Comment down below with your thoughts. Like the video if you like it. Subscribe to the channel for daily League of Legends content. Follow me on Twitter. Join the Discord. Become a YouTube supporter. And hope to see you again tomorrow.